Hi, everybody, and welcome to the CDO magazine interview series. Today, I'm here with Ted Kaouk, and Ted is the Deputy Director of Human Capital Data Management and Modernization and the Chief Data Officer at the Office of Personnel Management. Welcome, Ted.
Hi, Denise. It's nice to be with you today.
Thanks. I'm very excited about the conversation. Just want to let everyone know we are partnering with CDO Magazine, MIT, CDOIQ, and the International Society of Chief Data Officers in a series of interviews. So again, really excited to have you. And I'm hoping that we can just start by having you tell us a little bit about your story. How did you get here today?
Well, I think it's maybe a good introduction just to let folks know that the Chief Data Officer position is a relatively new one in the federal government. Under the Evidence Act, all federal agencies were required to establish Chief Data Officers who are have the responsibility for the first time of leveraging federal data as a strategic asset for evidence building, evaluation, improving programs, improving agency decision making, and also making federal data available to the public. And so I had that role for a number of years over at the Department of Agriculture. I spent about a decade at that agency in the federal government. And in my current role, where I've been for the past 5 months or so, it's at the Office of Personnel Management, as you mentioned. I'm the OPM, the Chief Data Officer there, as well as the Deputy Director for Human Capital Data Management and Modernization. So from the perspective of what do we do as a mission, we at our agency help to lead the federal government, which is the world's largest employer, by managing things like federal health and healthcare and benefits, processing retirement actions, publishing federal job opportunities, and then providing the human resource policies that are managed across the federal government. We are what our director, Ahuja, calls the people behind the people. So with all of that comes stewardship over a really immense amount of data. We have data on 2.1 million current federal employees across those 430 federal departments. 8.2 million enrollees in federal employee health benefits program, and then 2.7 million federal retirees and annuitants, and many prospective employees. So given that we have all of that data, my job is really to look across that data. We've got data on from recruitment all the way to employment to retirement. And so we feel pretty strongly that this agency at this point in its history has a really historic opportunity to become the premier hub for human capital data analysis in the country, delivering advanced analytics, data standards across the federal government, digital and data solutions that together can be the key enablers for strategic human capital data management. So that's a little bit about my current role. Happy to talk more about it and look forward to the conversation today.
Yeah, that is an incredible amount of data. I think it's just something that the average citizen doesn't think about. But when you hear it described the way you just described it, it's really incredible. And as a citizen, it's exciting to me to think about the possibilities that come out of having data like this, and the changes that we can make to constituent, programs and climate and who knows what else. That's really incredible. So I know that through the CDO Council, you were active in leading creation of COVID-19 working group that helped to provide pandemic related data. Can you talk about that experience and lessons learned that you can apply using general government data in the future?
Absolutely. That was such an interesting experience for us as a council. We had met as a council for the first time in January 2020. This council was created under the Evidence Act, similar to the individual positions of agencies. And so in that first meeting in January, we knew the mission that we had, been set out for in terms of our agencies to be able to better share data, use data. I was just talking about one cross-section of our data, which is our human capital data. But think about all the missions that we have as a government as a whole. And so we knew what those roles were. Many of us were really new in those roles. We had taken on new responsibilities. Many of us only were an office of one, given it was a new function. So we were thinking about how to implement the significant requirements of what was the first federal data strategy and all of the actions. And maybe we can talk about that as well. But it was really just a couple months later, obviously, I think April timeframe, where the significant threats of the pandemic were beginning to be really clear. And federal agency demands for data and for decision support tools were at an all-time high. So one of our first actions as a council was to establish what was our first working group on COVID-19 data. We set out to identify key questions that agencies had, as well as data and tools that were needed to support agency response efforts. We found in many cases that the data existed to answer those questions. And we also found certain challenges that federal leaders and staff on the ground had experienced their own significant challenges in accessing that data, which really inhibited our efforts to build dashboards and other tools that were needed for analysis and decision-making around things like workforce safety and continuity of operations. So we collaborated with CDC, with Department of Health and Human Services, with agencies to create shared decision support tools on COVID-19 and guidance on how to use them. But we also captured, I think, a lot of lessons learned in this initial working group activity to help us understand some of the gaps about how to support decision support for whether they were common issues or urgent issues across multiple federal agencies. And so it was that backdrop where we had a clear statutory mandate under the Evidence Act to improve data sharing and leveraging our data. We had the long-term strategic vision with the federal data strategy. And then we had this urgent need with COVID-19 that really helped us to, cut our teeth as a community and to build a community that really wanted to make a difference. And so a lot of lessons learned, a lot of opportunities that came out of that initial working group for sure.
That's awesome. I think when I was reading about that group, and I didn't have a lot of the detail until just now that you shared it with us, but my first thought was, well, thank God the Evidence Act happened when it happened, and that you had these people in these positions that could come together so quickly in a time of need and have this conversation. So I think the timing was really fortunate. Do you feel like that too? I mean, what would we have done if there was no data positions in government? It would have been a lot trickier.
I mean, as difficult as a situation as it was for everyone, I think the timing of it all helped to sort of give a real mandate for why we were in those positions. Yeah. And it's helped to continue, I think, to propel us forward in a lot of our conversations. So it really was kind of an accelerant to a lot of our conversations, because we went from the abstract to something really, really concrete very quickly.
Yeah, it feels good to know that we now have this foundation in place for whatever that is whatever the situation is that comes up next, so that's really cool. Thank you for sharing that with us. So you spent some time at the USDA, and while you were there, you led the charge in giving employees better access to information. I know you used a human-centered approach, which brought both employees and executives to the table to stand up dashboards. Can I just ask you to explain or talk a little bit about how that contributed to the success of the project and the types of information that you were able to compile using that human-centered approach?
Sure. I mean, I think it was important for us to recognize that, and I think this is true, whether it's a private entity or whether it's a public entity, that we were asking the organization to make a lot of changes to how they were using and accessing and making decisions. And so having a really interdisciplinary team of highly skilled data analysts and data scientists, coupled with people who were really good listeners and could develop products that people got excited about using, I think was really critical to that change approach. And so human-centered design was just really central to everything that we did. Many of the challenges we had for getting started at the beginning was trying to bring insights to, from this vast amount of data, what is important. Getting people into a space where they felt comfortable asking big questions, not based on the data that they thought that they had access to, but based on their real questions. And so for us, it was important to be able to put people in that creative space where they could do, kind of that divergent, convergent thinking, and be able to provide that structured process for them, starting with the questions and then using the possibilities within things like data visualization to be able to really iterate quickly, to bring those insights back to them as fast as possible, and then to continue to refine them because the questions got better. Our leadership got better at being able to understand what was possible. And quite often we were able to answer questions that people really didn't realize were possible before we invited them to ask them. And so that was really exciting and really critical. We also created across a very vast agency, 19 different agencies, really large organizations like the Forest Service managing national forests, the SNAP program, 2,200 retail operations with farmers and ranchers across the country, and many more, what our common opportunity was. And surprising as it may sound, we had a common template for our dashboard so that if leader went in and looked at an enterprise dashboard or something that an agency at a component level had created, the look and feel was something that they recognized and they could find what they were looking for quickly. So that approach of the iterative nature of it and also having a structure for having a product that was easy and intuitive to use, I think were really critical for getting as much adoption as we did get.
I just want to say thank you so much for spending a little bit of time with me. I'm fascinated by the work that you do, and I'm very appreciative of the work that you and the other federal government CDOs are doing on our behalf every day. So thank you very much for that. And again, thank you for sharing with us and spending the time with us today. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity, Denise. I had a great time, and anytime, look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no. So again, thank you, Ted, for joining me today. And for all of you out there listening, please visit cdomagazine.tech for additional interviews, and have a great day, everybody.